Hello, you guys. Hello.
Hi.
Welcome, Michael Urie, to the Talk Back with Tom and Drew. Hooray!
Thank you.
Thank you for watching. Thank you for taking the time to do this.
It was absolutely my pleasure. I just watched it, and then I did yoga, and I took a shower, and now I'm here with you. It's not quite a talk back post show, but I'm still feeling the. I'm still feeling the feels from it. It is so funny. It is so moving. It is very upsetting, and it is. I found it triggering. I think that's in part because you're so raw, Tom. I mean, it's just you put it out there in an elegant way, and that is. I mean, that's also in part. I'm sure Drew's like
Yes.
work helping.
Abuse.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
I'm
Listen,
not feeling it. More roar.
he would have me just run around the street saying my lines just again and again, just to just get me out of my head.
And then I would ask strangers on the street, "Do you believe him?"
Yeah.
Try it
Yeah.
again. I'm very calm. I'm very comforting and very paternal in that way.
I believe that. That about you. That you brought such like you put it all on the page, and then I'm sure like that it could have easily become something that just felt like vomit, because it's so personal, it's so emotional, there's such a history to it. It could have just come at you, but the pace and the time you took, and the elegance with which you moved around that space. My gosh, it was so nice to see somebody in a theater.
Right?
Oh, great to see
It's so great to be in the theater.
Yeah. And you did a really, I thought it, because obviously there are big laughs. And like it would be weird if you like held for them, but I thought it was the perfect balance of like landing a joke, not being afraid to land a joke as if it were an audience filled with people that were laughing, and not waiting for that, for whatever that laugh, however long it would be, not writing a laugh, because obviously we're all at home. So, we're laughing, whereas like a group of people would like build a laugh would build, like I'm laughing and then that makes you laugh, and it's just me alone laughing my one or two little chuckles, but out loud. I mean, I laughed out loud.
Oh, good. Great.
It was, and you moved on in the perfect way. It was perfectly calibrated, the way in which you handle the laughs, and then the way in which the way in which you still managed to find such spontaneity without people. I mean, because I mean, we are three homosexuals who know our way around a solo play. So much about doing a solo play is feeding off of the audience.
Yes.
They have to become the other character, and you did that.
Thank you.
Without them.
Man, let me tell you, it was after so when we shot it, we did the show twice without stopping, and like, if I flubbed a line, I'd kind of just like pick up. But after the first time, I was so jarred and my brain was so fucked, because we had been rehearsing with like a few people there, like, the designers and Drew, and people were giving me something. Then the very first time I did it, like, performance, motherfucker, just go for it. There was just people watching me like this.
Right, exactly.
Looking at cameras, doing their work. And I was like, after it was over, I turned to Drew and I'm like, I'm terrible. It's over. Just end it now. I just want to kill myself.
It was definitely one of the biggest challenges, because also, I mean, it's important, I think, to note that Tom has never done this show in front of an audience. So he's never had more than 5 people in a room at a time looking at this. And then he went from 5 to 0. And so we really had to calibrate that so it didn't feel like we were pushing forward and not letting it breathe and not letting it. And so it was about finding those moments where I'm like, just talk to us like you're talking to one person, and then your characters can be your moments of high energy, or your little moments here and there, or when you go on a rant, we can move up the energy there. But it was about finding that and sort of imagining where the audience might be, because you're right, Michael, a different audience is going to react differently every night. And then we're at home, we'll probably laugh out loud less when you're by yourself, but you'll have those moments that you'll surprise yourself and laugh out loud. But those are going to be different for every person. I'm watching the edit and I'm going, there's things that make me laugh that I've never laughed at before. I'm watching it, but just now I'm going, oh, that's really funny. So it's such a hard thing to do. It's like a tree falling in the woods. It's like to do comedy for no one. It's like, who is there? But I think it's also kind of a happy accident about this play, which your play is about. It's called Making Friends, and how you do anything you can to get people to like you, and you're talking to an empty room, and it's like, I think there's something kind of beautifully poignant about that. It's like the thing about like, please love me. And so that was just, thanks COVID. But that really helps add a layer to this.
I like her. She's cool. She's cool.
Right.
I kept imagining during the taping, Drew in a corner stifling laugh. I kept imagining how, because I'm like, there, I know he's there. I know he's somewhere in that room with a mask on. How is he not laughing at this?
I was.
You were.
Well, and that was what's so funny. I was doing this during the take, and then after the first take, Tom's like, I'm terrible. This is the worst thing I've ever done. What am I doing? It's awful. And I'm like, honey, I've seen it 400 times and you're still making me laugh. So, but I've never performed, I don't think, like, I mean, I guess when I did my solo show, I did that, but still we were doing it in pieces, and I had the benefit of doing it in front of an audience before. So I knew where the laughs usually were.
Right.
Yeah,
you knew what an audience might do, and so you were able to sort of like imagine the ups and downs. But it felt so organic, and it felt like the perfect balance. But like it is theater. It feels like theater, and it is. You're in a theater. We know you're in a theater right away, and we see that you're playing to a theater, which is really lovely. And it is it feels like a performance for an empty theater, and we are peeking in. We're just peeking into like somebody working through something, and I can't believe you've only done it all the way through those 2 times. I'm sure you did it other times through without recording it, but it feels very lived in.
Oh, well, thank you. When
I know it's your life, but
it is. It is. We really kind of. I read the very first version of it. You saw a few minutes of it back at the end of September. So from September to now. So that's we taped it on December 1st. So that's like 2 months of intensive work, and really just a month of intensive work is when we really began. Drew and I, in November is really when we kind of like went in there and kind of like did it. So I'm glad you felt that way, because I was worried that it would feel kind of like I was worried that it would feel the opposite of that, because I haven't done it for anyone, and it's my first time writing, so I was very worried that it would feel like, oh, you could tell this is her first go at it, or like, oh,
no,
or this doesn't feel lived in, or this doesn't feel kind of like inside his body, because he didn't have enough time to like enough drafts and enough rehearsal or whatever. But I think we actually did have enough rehearsal. We did have enough time, and it was really all I was thinking about. And I think what helps is because it's me, like I just had to be myself.
And that also makes it the hardest. And that's why you were the hardest on yourself, because it is your story, and don't we all say, is my story valid enough? Does my life, I mean, we all have that in everything that we write. We always go, oh, this is dumb. This isn't enough. Like we all feel that. And that's like, I think, I mean, Michael, you did that for me on my show. Like when you directed my show, Tom, you did that for me when you directed my show. You both like helped me like just sort of mentally go, this is great. And I feel like that's sort of like a lot of my job with you, Tom, that this is just kind of going, yes, this is it. We're doing this, and we all have signed off on this. But you're getting over that hump. And for anybody watching this, thinking about doing your show, I will tell you, it is the hardest thing, is to get out of your own critic. It's the worst when you're doing a solo show, because you'll constantly watch it and go, oh, this is dumb. And every time you try to reach outside your own experience and write something that you think is more interesting, it comes off false. And so like you have to go back to that thing that like where it hurts the most or where you think it's the most boring is where the gold is. So that's
so interesting. That's a very digging deeper is actually can actually be, you know, what throws you off, and it's the stuff that you're afraid to show, the boring stuff that is what we want. We want the private moment that you don't show anybody else. That's very,
and that is really what Drew kept saying to me the entire time. When I'd be like, you know, I'd have to go back and rewrite a section, or we were doing something, and he was like, just dare to be boring. He's like, don't overcomplicate it. He's like, you please be boring. I want you to be boring. And he was like, even when you think you're boring, Tom, you're incredibly interesting. And that was also one of the things that I had to learn as we were doing it, because I just wanted to get it out. And he would be like, Tom, you sitting and thinking is enough. You don't need anything else besides us watching you try to figure it out. He was like, just figure it out. And he's like, if you forget a line, you're not allowed to stop. Try and find it. Try and find it, because I'm probably going to use all of that as you try and find it.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, you know, that it is, you know, as you discuss this process, it's very interesting. I didn't, you know any of that. I didn't know that these are the things that you talked about. It's very interesting to hear that. But I noticed these the spontaneity, you know, like that you were so spontaneous without an audience. I feel like what you're talking about is these moments where you allowed yourself to be boring and then earned some great flash or some great detrinicism where you like you suddenly become a pretzel, or you know you go on your side, you know, these moments where you explode a little bit, that they come out of what I imagine are these crafted boring moments or dull moments or you know, mundane things that then earn these little explosions that feel so spontaneous. They feel like things that could only have been created in front of an audience.
Oh, interesting.
Oh, that's so great.
Yeah, thank you.
But Tom, your brain, and I've told you, like you jump like synapses, boom, 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 boom. And it's why we love you in conversation. It's like, oh my God, and we get it. And it was a lot of it is like sort of smoothing out and finding, like I keep saying, the connective tissue and going, why this to this? Let's just find this connective. And it's interesting because you have like flash on either side, and you're just connecting flash to flash. So this part in the middle doesn't have to also be like, as if we lose it, we never get to the other thing. If I'm making any sense with my
you are making sense.
Right.
You are making sense.
So it's just about finding that sort of like the path and finding the structure, because you know, and that's the part of it that's really hard in writing, I think, is like the eating your vegetables part of it, of like, ugh, what is this all about? But it actually like Michael says, helps you earn.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's also kind of why I chose Drew specifically for this too. One, because he's also angry like me. We mostly just when we're talking with each other, it's just like, fuck this person and fuck that nugget, fuck this dick, and like these
fuck that nugget,
fuck that nugget, and like so we just. I was like, and I also knew how good Drew is, as you well know this, Michael, how good he is with structure and kind of like making things make sense in a space where sometimes there is no sense. Right. And that's the thing that I loved about Happy Birthday, Doug, because he was like, look at all of this that I'm going to help you make sense. And then at the end, it all wraps itself together. And you're like, oh, this all works. So when I was trying to figure out who I needed to be a partner on this, it was obviously Drew, because he did help me so much in the rehearsal process with the connective tissue and trying to be like, Tom, this doesn't make sense, these two things together. And I'm like, what do you mean? It's what everyone thinks. And he's like,
fuck you, nugget.
Yeah, fuck you, nugget. And I was like, I just had to have some realizations to leave my own brain for a minute to be like, girl, you gotta explain yourself.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, that's really interesting. And that brings me to a question that I wanted to ask you about. And I can't believe you've never written anything before, because I think that the first, I don't know what you call it, the overture, the cold open of the play is an exquisite piece of writing. And I've never seen anything quite so authentically anxious before. I've never seen somebody tackle social anxiety in such a such a clear way so quickly. It was immediately familiar to me what you were doing, and immediate like an immediate, you know, examining of like my psyche. And I'm sure, you know, I mean, you know, many people's, but people who like deal with anxiety, especially social anxiety, will be triggered by this opening scene and will see exactly what, you know, like what it feels, you know, that's what it feels like, what you do in that opening scene. And by the way, I've been at parties with you, I've seen you in public, you're not like that, obviously. But like I
Not at
believe
all
that,
like that.
I believe that that's what's going on in your head, because that's
Internally.
what's on in my head. And it was very familiar to me. And so I, you know, like in the same, it's so interesting that you were talking about the structure of Happy Birthday, Doug, because in some ways, this is the reverse, where you see the like the psyche blown open first and foremost, and then you learn about the man. And in Happy Birthday, Doug, you don't learn who the man is until the end. You sort of
Oh
like
yeah, interesting. That's
Right.
very. That's such a good point.
you don't get the like the you don't get the kernel or the you know the orb of the guy until it's almost over, and you've put him together yourself. But this guy, you see the bleeding heart of Tom right away, and then we learn how he got to that place. And I also love that, like, there's not a, you know, like because you start there and you end with this ferocious, fabulous piece of movement, you don't like, there's not a you know, there's not like any kind of resolution. It's more like I mean, I feel like at the end, and this is how I live with it.
Yes.
You know, and it's very satisfying. It's very, and it is triggering, as I said, as I keep saying, but it is so human, and I felt seen. It's not about me, obviously, like you were doing a play about you, but because you set it up the way you do, and you put it to bed the way that you do, it feels like you have been. I feel seen, and I feel like you feel seen.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's right. And I'm glad that you had that reaction because I I think that my story in a way can be universal in that we all don't talk about those things enough. What make the minutia that makes us angry, but those little things that are minutia, angry, you know, emotional reactions, they just build up inside of you, and then all of a sudden you don't realize why the fuck you're being a fake person. And I love that you picked up on all of that because that
right away.
that is the point. That is the point that, you know, it is also to tell my family story because I still like I cannot believe that I'm you know around these human beings who just are not authentically themselves even though they think they are. I think that you know I'm glad that you had that reaction. That's really great. That's really really great.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about how you wrote that first scene, that, or that like prologue, or how it, you know, at what point you wrote that, or
You know that the very first version of it didn't have that in there, and I think it actually was Drew's suggestion that I did a version of myself. It was, wasn't it, Drew? Didn't you tell me
It
to do
was.
that?
Originally, we were going to keep coming back and forth to him.
We were, and we did. We did in one draft. I did keep coming back to Party Tom because I thought the first idea I had was, oh, I'll start with Party Tom and we'll be in the party. And then we'll go into my inner psyche inside the
And
party,
keep coming
come back
back
up for
party.
air, and then come back down. And then you know, and then the dance was going to happen at the party. You know, that was going to be like me just dancing at a party. And I set out to do that. And then as I went on the journey of writing and figuring in, like, you know, Michelangelo uncovering the statue within the marble, I found that wasn't necessary anymore. We only had to see him one time.
And it was hindering us too, because we were sort of stuck. So I'm like, why are we in this sort of structure where we have to bring every character to the party? And whereas, you know, that's, you know, in my last show that worked for my show, but in this one I'm like, we need to go to New York at times, and we need to go back with your family, and we need to go your dream uncles, we need to go to a cockroach at some time. So we wanted to sort of like, and also it's not about the party, like we also were like, we established that early on, like this is how we see you in public. And we got all of it. I think we were able to put all of it in that first monologue. And so we can move on and then just sort of get into the why more.
Yeah.
And like, we didn't need to go back to it. So,
and it was one of the harder pieces for us to get right. It took the longest to get that part right. Some of the other characters came incredibly easy, and those like Tom pontification analysis moments that happen where it's like just very present, those kind of came naturally and were also kind of part of that very first draft that I read back in September, or like a different feeling, but the same kind of thing. But that Party Tom thing, even performance wise, took me a while to get. It took me a while to get to that place.
So high energy, and also I kept telling you is his point of view is he has no point of view.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like, so what can you play? You're just desperate for love. And so and I was like, you have to state an opinion and then walk that opinion back and then say, I'm an idiot, I don't know. So that's so hard to harness that, as opposed to being like, I don't know what drives him. He's just deeply insecure. But that's the thing that I think we watch and we relate to. And like Michael said, we've all been that person in the party. We've all felt that way.
Yeah.
We've you see, I'm like, I've done that, and then I've known I was doing it, and I've worried I was going to get caught doing it.
Right.
Yes.
So I've watched other people do it. I've thought about whether or not to call them out for doing it.
Yes.
It's very real, and I've never seen it really done like that. I've never seen it. I've really never seen it actualized in that way before.
Yeah.
Very, very virtuosic, and just what a way to start a show. What a very exciting way to start a show.
Oh, great. Well, yeah, and thank you. And that's kind of how we got to that place. So you see him, and then it's fun that we just reference him. I just bring him up again as like, remember that person, it kind of like, as I'm setting up a TED Talk in a way, because I think even that was brought up one or two times in rehearsal, kind of like, you've got your thesis. A lot of this was about making sure it was very clear what my thesis was in there and how everything related to that. And that's kind of like how it all stemmed off of that Party Tom into then you go down the rabbit hole of everything else.
Right. There are a few other things there are a few other ideas that you present that are things that like that I'd never really thought about before, that are these incredible observations about what it's like. I mean, obviously like that, going off of this social anxiety sort of aria that you do at the top of the play, there are other little nuggets of great observation about the world, about the queer community, about people who are not like their families, things like the gay smirk, which like you said it and I was like, what's the gay smirk? And then you did it and I was like, the gay smirk. And why do we do that?
Why do we do it?
Why do we do that?
A friend of mine, I was just telling a friend, we were just today, I promise, that we sent a picture of a friend who was like doing that face. And I said, oh my God, Tom talks about it. I can't wait for you to see Tom's show, because he mentions it in the show. And my friend was like, it's like twinks do like the duck face. Yeah. And then bears do, he said something, the bears do like a disappointed, what did you do this? He said, bears do a chagrined pelican.
Chagrined pelican.
Frankie Frascator, I'm giving you credit. But like and it's so true. It's that thing you're kind of like,
yeah.
Like, I'm just a bro. It's also, it's rooted in homophobia, because it's like, I don't want to look gay. So it's like, I want to look like a fucking dumb dude. Like, ooh. But it's like, do you think straight guys look like that? Because they don't. Like,
the gay smirk for me is twee. It's kind of like, I'm just
here.
Cute. I'm just cute. And it's like, don't you just want to put your dick in me? like that's what that gay smirk is to me, that it literally kills me. That's why I unfollow many people on Instagram, because I'm like, you're not allowed.
But it is true, rooted in homophobia, and it's rooted into this idea that I don't feel attractive or beautiful, or I'll never be, I'll never look the way that I want to, so I'm going to screw it up somehow, or or I don't want you to think that that I think I'm cute while I'm taking this photo. So
Yeah,
I'm gonna,
there's also that. Yeah.
you know, it's all, I mean, and I found myself doing it. I'm like, okay, so I better take a selfie because I'm gay. And this is the stupid face I'm gonna make. And then I see it and I'm like, why am I making that face? Everyone's gonna see right through that face. Figure out something, you know, it's very, that was another very triggering moment where you saw right through all of us. And what you do beautifully is like, it's not just an indictment, it's an admission. Like you know, it's like, you know, like you don't just, you're not just calling everybody out. We all get this, we all get a pass. And this is the thing that like kept hurting me watching the play, was like that we're all like, you know, like, and I think about this sometimes, you know, just in, you know, in general, as we as queer people navigate the world, and the amount of things that like the amount of extra we have to bring to every situation, even the situations that we're in which we are safest. You know, the most cliche is that we have to come out in every conversation we have, and with that comes a lot of like of protecting the people that we're coming out to, you know, giving them the past to have not seen that, or be okay with that, or not be okay with that, or not have to make any mention of it at all, and all of that like is bottled up in us all the time. And you know, I think about like navigating my family, which is, you know, a mom and a dad and a sister who is gay, and that's it. And really that's it. I mean, I have some cousins and some aunts and uncles and things like that, but it's not, you know, like I'm not immersed in a giant, you know, I was just seeing, like, when I imagined your family,
it's just so big.
I want to get to your family in a second, but when I imagine this family that like this I kept imagining, you know, like in cartoons when somebody like starts a fight and it's just like dirt and
Yes.
Yes.
and then they pick up other people, yeah, and
Yes.
then they like, and like everybody gets, that's how I imagined the Trinus. Just like a giant ball of tornado rolling around. But I want to get to that in just a second. I just wanted to point out a couple of other, the Dick Whisper formula is like, I'm blown away and I'm very impressed. And then
You're welcome.
The horrible gay who misses New York. These are the like just that horrible homosexual who and I know, you know, and I'm a you know, like, and I'm a New Yorker who doesn't want to live in LA but lives in New York, and I totally respect all of the and I totally get it too, by the way, especially after 9 months of a pandemic when nothing that's good about New York is happening. I totally get it. And I always did understand. I mean, I call them "fuck you New York" days, where like New York just fucks you.
Yes.
And everything goes wrong, and it's such a New York thing, and it's very singular to here. But those people who you know, that person, that guy that you do, who's relishing the rain in Los Angeles.
I just realized that he doesn't know that it's a lady.
I know a lot of people don't, Tom, and that's fine. I don't.
Oh no, I love it. No, I love that. I love that. I love that it comes across in the character's name is Stacy. And I love that. I love this so much. This makes me so happy. Keep talking. Keep talking.
That's a lady.
No, but it doesn't matter. This isn't a bad thing.
Bring it back. We bring it back later in the voiceover. No, but I wasn't even going to correct you on that, because I think a lot of people watching it are going to think that character is a man. And then the voiceover character later, when it's like she's like going the montage from the work to thing, that's essentially the same character, but you wouldn't know that maybe because you don't speak in the voiceover.
And I think that's great that we don't specifically say it, because I love that it's genderless. I love that you put your own shit onto that character. I love that so much. Yeah. I love it. 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 I love that you hated that game, because that is a gay man, that is a woman. It doesn't matter. It is genderless. That person is genderless, even though I gave it personally for me. That just helped me create the character in my head. But
Right.
I mean, I think this is so great that that's what you took from it. I love that so much. I love it. I love it. I love it. That's great.
Well, and it is that. I mean, I also because I'm a New Yorker and I am that horrible. There's that horrible person is in me, and like I there. And it's so, like the New York versus LA conversation is so interesting because we go where we want to be ultimately. And
Yeah.
so right about what you say about New York, like everyone's everywhere all the time, that line.
Yeah.
So true. You can't, and even in the pandemic, you can't escape people.
No.
Right. And you say it, Tom. You say, if you don't like LA, leave. I mean, because usually the conversation is about people just bagging on LA. Because we're like, we hate LA. LA's the worst. LA sucks. And I agree. LA it can be a wasteland and a
Wasteland.
horrible place. But we sort of agree with that as Angelians. We kind of go, I know this fucking place. And then it is really funny when you turn on your ear and like hate on New York because there's so many things that I love about New York and that I think are just so wonderful. But that I also agree with you on this. And Tom, when you and I are there working, we're always just like, ugh, because it is such a different way. And then we're constantly being told, isn't New York great? New York's the best. And we're like, well, we can't can't do X, Y, and Z. We miss that. We actually choose to live somewhere else, So it's a conversation I love. I mean,
yeah.
I had gotten a thing the other day with a friend in New York who I love dearly, but we were talking about a lady I haven't met who wrote a very curt email, and she's in New York. And he wrote back, he goes, yeah, I call that the LA email. I'm like, but she's in New York. He's like, yeah, but that's how people in LA are. And I'm like, but she's in New York. Like, it's just such a weird.
It is a very
argument.
weird.
Like we're talking about a New Yorker, and you're going to use LA. It has nothing to do with this conversation. So I love the rivalry. I think it's just so funny.
It's so strange. It's so weird, and it also exists too here in even California too. If you go up to San Francisco, they hate LA just the same.
They hate LA.
They really hate LA. But like LA, the funny thing about LA is we all sit here going, okay. We all don't care.
Like, I know.
But everyone like hates it sometimes.
Right.
No one in LA tries to make you like LA.
No one here tries to make you
or I know. It's
That's so true. And people in New York are always try to convince LA people that they should be in New York, or that they really would rather be in New York.
Yes.
That's right. Many of the times I go home and to my family or to see some of my friends who do live in the city, and they're just like, don't you just miss it? Don't you miss it? And I will recall this one story where I was living at your apartment, Michael Urie, and I had to meet my friends in Brooklyn on a Saturday in the middle of all of the trains being broken. It took me 3 hours. And let me tell you, those listening, I arrived and I said to my friends, if you ever fucking say to me again that I should move to New York, I will rip your face off. And they were like, okay, yeah, okay. They just like let it go. And thusly, they have never brought it up with me again.
After people watch your show, I don't think they're going to
No, I don't think so.
I think this will solve that problem for you pretty easily.
I think it'll put it to bed. But yeah,
I think I'll put it to bed.
Ryan and I went to Brooklyn today, and we were supposed to take the A train. And we were running a little late, and the A train didn't come, but the C train, which is the local, did. And I was like, well, let's just get on this. And I immediately regretted it. And I started having all this anxiety. We should have waited for an A train. And then we got to the stop, and an A train pulled in, and then it left before we had a chance to get out. And I was like, well, we're going to be late. We're going to be late. And it was like, I was melting and unraveling about a fucking, this. And we ended up not being late at all. And that was luck that we weren't late, but it's like those extra anxiety, New York, it'll chew you up.
It'll chew you up into a million pieces. And for some reason, when I return, the very first few days that I'm there, I do feel settled. It's just that it takes around day 3 is when it starts to go, like the twitch starts to happen. But, it's going to be a topic of conversation, I'm sure, after people see the show, about with themselves or with the people they're watching or other people who have already watched it, about discussing how to digest what I have torn apart about what I think of New York.
Yeah, that's that happen as we're discussing. There's a lot of things that make you look in about your play, which is very the fact that it is such a personal story, and yet you force your audience to look within when you're telling your not only personal but very specific story. I mean, not many people grow up in a family as big as yours.
No.
And also, you know, also something that's really interesting to me. So let's talk about your family, because it's so big.
Yeah.
And it feels like it's so I mean, I don't know if close is the right word, but so like
Oh,
webbed.
it's
Like
very webbed.
and the fact that there are, what is it, 50 people in your
There's
like,
so there is I'm one of 6 children. My dad is one of 8, right? There's about 30 cousins there, but then those cousins have gotten married and had children. So
right.
you need to add another 20 or 30 now into this lineup, because some of them are also like my one cousin.
And that's just on one side.
That's one side. My one cousin already has 5 or 6 children.
And no other gays.
None.
See, that's the crazy thing. I mean, Drew, do you
No.
have any other gay people in your family?
I do.
Yeah, me too.
I do.
None.
And I have a small family. I mean, my sister obviously
And
is gay.
Same.
what that really says to me, love them, and I talk a lot about them. What that really says to me is that my family didn't set us up for that kind of exploration, and I was I was the only black sheep who was like, something is wrong here, and I had to go inside and look really hard and very deep. I mean, the struggle for me, the hardest time I had to come out was not to my friends, but it was to my cousin Laura, who is my very closest cousin, who is my best friend. And I don't talk about that relationship too much in the play, but she is a female version of me. And we are very close. And the hardest thing for me to do was when I went to college and I came out to everyone but her in the first like week, and then I had to sit down and tell my cousin that I was gay. But in order to do that, I'm getting chills because I'm thinking about it. In order to do that, I had to admit to my family that I was gay. So it wasn't just my cousin. It was the 30 something people that I had to come out to, because if I told her, then it was real, and then it had to spread. I had to admit to myself that I'm telling this person, and then from here I have to tell everyone else. And I told her, and 2 years later, I told my mom and my dad. Now, my mom and my dad I need to be very specific because I don't actually bring them up too much in this show. I bring them up like once or twice because they're not really, I never got pressure from those 2 people. My
They're
dad
wonderful. They're
very,
lovely, wonderful.
he's very just like, we love everyone. My dad believes in reincarnation. Like he's out to lunch always. And it really came from the extended family, because like I'm the second in the lineup of the children, so it's my older sister Christine, then myself, and then the rest of them. And so like I didn't even have like pressure up here, like above me. There was no pressure up there. So it really came from everyone else. And like all of my aunts, I'm finding, as I keep telling my mom and dad, and they ask me all the time, they're just like, so Tom, tell me about the show. Very scared, very scared, very frightened. All my siblings were like, what are you going to talk about in your show? And I'm like, not you. And they're like, okay, great. Okay. They like calm down for a second. But as I'm telling my parents about the process of all of this, they're like, well, so and so did bring up to us all the time, like, you have to watch him, or like so and so was like, oh, does he really have to wear those heels? Does he really have to wear a dress? Do you really want him to be like that? They were all parenting my parents to try and parent their own child, and my mother let me run around the house in heels, in dresses, in blankets around my waist. And I would go on the steps of my house with a blanket around my waist, and I'd walk down the steps and just look behind me so I could see the train fall behind every step. And my mother would be like, great, what? Oh, have a good time. She's just making food for 6 other mouths.
Wonderful.
She just didn't care. She did not care.
Too busy to care.
Too busy to care.
Too much.
My mom was like, there's too much to do. Fuck all of these people telling me how to raise my child. And
I understand that so well.
Right. And I think that's how I came from the beyond it. I think that's how I can sit here going, all of these 50 plus people are not a homosexual. I'm the only one. Because whether they have the thoughts or they're bisexual or they are not, or they truly are straight or whatever their sexual orientation is, I think that they didn't take the time to look and see if that was the answer, because that wasn't even a choice to look.
Wow.
I don't think so. I don't think that was a choice to look. Now it's a choice because I did it. I came out, and now all my aunts and uncles are just like, oh, I love gays. Yes. And they've met my partner, Joseph. They've met him. I mean, they're all like so happy about it. And they give him these big hugs and they ask every time, how's Joseph? How's Joseph? Now they are very active about being a gay, like a gay.
Well, you made it real for them.
Because I made it real for them, because they're like, but I love this person. I can't hate what it is. Because I remember one of my aunts, when I was like, I must have been like 13, in my teenage years, my aunt Bern, bless her, she died this year. She was playing a video for me of this like Christian rock band, and he was talking about like how abortion's terrible and gays are shit, and like he was going off in his music video
In the
about
song. What a great
song.
big topic for music.
And she, from the other room, she made me sit down and watch it with my friend. From the other room, I heard her go, that's right, that's right, that's right, like agreeing loudly so I could hear. And that burned and seared into my brain so strongly, because I was just like, oh, all right, yeah, okay. But that's the messaging that she gave her 5 children. So of course they're not going to discover, they're not going to explore, they're not going to find it if they are or they not, or they're not. They're just going to do. They're just going to do.
And you think that the fact that your parents, specifically your parents, sort of let you be who you were, and the fact that you were, I mean, you said black sheep. Do you think that like under a more in a more oppressive household like your Aunt Burns, what do you think?
I would have been a priest. I would have been a priest. Like that's why that Tommy is a priest.
Yeah.
Because in high school, I was already hooking up with boys, clearly. And part of me kept going to these, because I also went to a Catholic high school. So there was constant talk about how homosexuality was amoral or it was not real. And so I was like, well, and I had all of these fucking homo teachers who were Franciscan brothers around me, like clear homosexuals, like 10 out of 10 were fucking gay. And so I looked to these men and I'm like, oh, I can just be like that. So I started the process of joining the fraternity. So you had to be invited. And then I sat down for some talks about it. And then I went on these retreats and I talked to my parents. I'm like, I think I'm called to that cloth. And it wasn't until I fell in love with my first boyfriend, who's called Tony in the piece, that I realized that it's reciprocal, that it doesn't just feel like trash when you just put a dick in your mouth and then go away and are like, what did I do? And like bleed it out emotionally. When I felt like there was an emotional attachment I could have with another human being, I completely threw the priest thing out the door, because it was like, oh, oh, great, bye-bye. And so like that disappeared by the end of high school. It like came in and just came right back out. But to answer your question, if I was in those other households, I surely would have become a priest, because it would have been the best way to avoid.
Wow. Well, let's talk about Uncle Tommy, because I think it is so. It's such that is such a beautiful piece of another beautiful piece of writing, but a fascinating sequence in the play where you imagine this guy who you did not know, and he. So that you now that I know that you were the second child of your generation, it makes a lot of sense to me that you were named for him, because a great tragedy that had happened in the previous generation, but have you always imagined him? Talk to us a little bit about like what he's meant to you once you found out you were his namesake, and once you started to hear. I mean, obviously nobody knew him. Nobody. It's all it's a giant. There's no real memory of this person. He was just a tiny.
Yeah. I think I didn't know I was named after him until until I was a teenager. Like I didn't really know about it until then. And it didn't really hit me that I was named after this person until I really wrote this show. It didn't really like take hold inside of me because, and it had a lot to do with when my aunt died um a few months ago. I went to his grave because she's buried with him in the same plot, and I had never seen his tombstone before. And so I went in October to go see it. And that's really when it hit me, like, oh, this was a person. And almost all of my family had never really returned to that gravesite until we had to bury my aunt in the same spot. I mean, the drama. Um, uh, but that's really when it hit me. And writing the show really it hit me because that idea for the three Tommies just came to me one day when we were exploring it, and I went back one time to write, and it was one of the drafts, and I was just like, oh, this is interesting. And then it kind of just went down this path because I brought up Tommy very briefly in the very first draft. Just like, oh, I was named after him. And Drew said, that's how it began. Drew was like, you need to go deeper into that. He was like, this part right here.
Yeah, the very first version, you were kind of like, oh, I had this, uncle who died when he was 3. He probably may have been gay anyway. And I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. That is such a window in, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, you're mundane. What you think is mundane is so interesting to the rest of us because we're all going, I want to know about that. Like, stay there. Don't move to the next thing,
Yeah.
I sort of, when I think about it, I think of it as the climax of the piece because it is so to me revealing, and we can all, I mean, we all have those questions about where we've come from and how we are who we are. And we grab onto like, well, maybe this thing I don't know about this person I didn't know is how I became who I am, and it's very beautiful. Well, I think we should.
We should probably wrap her up.
I could talk about this. I
I know.
So, and I just think, Drew, you did such a beautiful job of making this into a play.
So much fun.
And giving it this beautiful beginning, middle, and end, and the dance is really incredible. It's a very moving.
Catherine Burns, best. Yeah. Do you know? I don't know if you know Catherine. Yes. Do you know her?
I don't.
She's amazing. She does a bunch of things. I don't know if you'd worked with her before, but yeah, she's great.
It's really beautiful. It's a really beautiful way to end it, and surprising, and I hope that a lot of people get to see it, and I hope that you get to do it for real people at some point. But it's incredible, even with nobody in the seats. There's something very special about you making this play all alone up there with you. I mean, not all alone, but executing it.
Yeah, like with a tiny village, as opposed to, I feel like theater is always made with a huge village of, like, the audience is such a big part of it, that this was kind of a smaller village, but thank God they were all so supportive, from Drew to the rest. It was really, really very great for them to just be like, keep going. Yes, keep going,
Yeah. Well, thank you.
No,
thank you so much, Michael, for doing this and watching it. And you're the first person to see it. I don't know if we're supposed to know this, but we're so glad you liked it.
Yeah, you're the very first person very first person who's not in this project to see it.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm very honored, and thank you. I loved it so much.
Well, till next time.
Yay.